What is up, people? Phoenix here. Today officially marks the last day of my 14-day quarantine, during which I've been confined to this little room with dim lights and broken television. But honestly, surprisingly, this 14-day has been kind of an unexpectedly pleasant and fulfilling experience. Because for the first time in I don't know how long, I could actually sit down and read books for as long as I wanted to and study foreign languages as much as I like to. So, can't complain. The only thing is that I could really use a beer right now, or a vodka, or I settle for anything with alcohol. I want my beer. But yeah, in this video, for which I made my bed for the first time in the last 14 days, I'm going to share with you some of the books I read in the last 2 weeks. Yeah, without further ado, let's begin. The first book is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. So Pachinko, for anyone who doesn't know, is kind of like, it's basically a Japanese version of the slot machine. And according to this book, is oftentimes, in the minds of the Japanese, associated with organized crime and ethnic Koreans for some reason. And this book is about a Korean immigrant family who migrated to Japan in the 1920s. And the story spans over 4 generations. For anyone who's not familiar with East Asian history, Korea was occupied by Japan from 1910 to 1945. So for 35 years, the Korean peninsula was Japanese colony. A lot of the Koreans who were back then subjects of the Japanese Empire migrated to Japan. Some of them seeking better job opportunities, seeking a better life. Others were forcefully brought to Japan as cheap labor. And the protagonist family went to Japan, namely Osaka, in the 1920s. And what was waiting for them was a lot of suffering, discrimination, failures to assimilate into local society, poor livelihood in general. And this book is about the stories of that family and their suffering. It is simultaneously deeply touching and heartbreaking. And the author, this book, written by a female author, Min Jin Lee, provides kind of a female perspective. One of the lines that's repetitively mentioned in the book is that a woman's life is suffering. This book reminds me of my grandma, and sometimes my mother. The sacrifice they've done throughout their life for their kids, and my mom for me. I think that's what a good fiction does. It's not the only thing that a good fiction does, nor is it the only standard for a good fiction, but it's one of the many things that a lot of good fictions do, is that it makes you want to be a better person. It makes you want to be a better father, a better mother, a better daughter or son or lover, a better friend. And this book does that. And the second book, focus, The Education of Henry Adams, edited by Ernest Samuels. So this is the autobiography by Henry Adams, who was the grandchild of the 6th president of the United States, John Quincy Adams, who was also the son of the 2nd president, John Adams. He has 2 presidents in his blood. But he himself was one of the greatest historians in American history for sure. His most famous work, The History of the United States of America under the administrations of Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, was one of the most celebrated works of history in America. And this book, which was published posthumously, won him a Pulitzer Prize and was named by Modern Library as the best English nonfiction book in the 20th century. And it was so for a reason. I'm going to read you a passage so you know what I'm talking about. The literary style just blows everything out of the water. Like, it makes any modern biography look outright pale. The young man had no idea what he was doing. The thought of posing for a gibbon never entered his mind. He was a tourist. Even to the depth of his subconsciousness, it was well for him that he should be nothing else, for even the greatest of men cannot sit with dignity in the close of evening among the ruins of the Capitol, unless they have something quite original to say about it. Tacitus could do it, so could Michelangelo. and so, at a pinch, could Gibbon, though in figure hardly heroic. But in sum, none of them could say very much more than the tourist, who went on repeating to himself the eternal question, why, why? As his neighbor, the blind beggar, might do, sitting next to him on the church steps. No one ever had answered the question to the satisfaction of anyone else, yet anyone who had either head or heart felt that sooner or later he must make up his mind what answer to accept. Substitute the word America for the word Rome, the question became personal. Humor and eloquence. Why am I going to be able to write something like that? Last but not least, Japan, A Short Cultural History by G.B. Sansom. This book is one of the classics in Japanese studies and East Asia studies. This book was first published in 1931, I believe, and a lot happened in the field. A lot of progress has been made in the field of Japanese studies. For example, in the beginning, it explains the genetic composition of the Japanese people and also the Ainus. And the book says that our Ainus are primarily Caucasians, which we have discovered is not true. That are they're genetically more East Asian than Caucasian, but they have some of the common facial features of Caucasians. But it still offers a lot of valuable insights into Japanese culture and Japanese society. I've only read through the first quarter of the book through Heian Jidai. So during the past week, I have witnessed the gradual penetration of Chinese civilization and its version of Buddhism, their penetration into Japanese cultural, political, and religious institutions. And this book delicately peels off layers and layers of religious and political complications of a Japanese culture. For example, like Chinese culture and Korean culture and Chinese writing, Confucianism, Buddhism, things like that. And gives a detailed explanation to each layer and every component of each layer. And here's a paragraph that I found very interesting about pre-Chinese, like pre-Confucianism, pre-Buddhism Japan. Because since I was very little, I've always found Japanese culture quite bizarre and exotic. After reading some of this book, I feel like the Japanese culture is kind of like bizarre from the very beginning. And the Great Purification Ritual, which is of uncertain date, but which embodies matter of great antiquity. There is a list of offenses, tsumi, from which the gods are asked to cleanse the people. These are divided into heavenly offenses and earthly offenses. The earthly offenses are wounding and killing, desecration of corpses, leprosy, tumors, incest. Though it appears intercourse between children of one father by different mothers was not considered incestuous, bestiality, but not, it appears, sodomy, calamity from creeping things, from the gods on high, from the birds and animals, and from witchcraft. And it goes on saying, what is abhorrent, what must be washed away and expiated, is not guilt, but pollution. The conception of sin, as distinct from uncleanness, is wanting or rudimentary. And throughout their history, the Japanese seem to have retained in some measure this incapacity to discern, or this reluctance to grapple with the problem of evil. Such a statement, once committed to writing, forthwith challenges contradictions in the writer's own mind. But it represents, if imperfectly, a truth, and much that is baffling the study of their history, from ancient to modern times, becomes clearer when one remembers that they have never been tortured by the sense of sin. I'm not sure I totally agree with them. I don't think the distant past had any implication about the morality of the modern Japanese people, or Japan as a country. And I think to suggest that will be kind of arbitrary. And also, this book explains how some of the religious practices came about and how the local Shinto belief kind of produced this interesting chemistry with Confucianism and Buddhism, and how a lot of the local religious practices came about, like the clapping in a shrine, things like that. So yeah, I'm very excited to read on. The last one is just a Japanese grammar book. It doesn't count as reading. Anyways, Don't forget to follow me on my socials. See you in my next video. Read more. Really want my beer. I really want my beer.